So this is a comment I've been getting more and more lately. How can I build a voice that I can be proud of?
Run, run, lost boy, they say to me.
Hi, my name is Mishan, singer, songwriter, and vocal coach. And to break down this question, there's actually a lot of pieces to it. Number one is pride. How do we be proud of the voice that we have? So a lot of this comes down to our emotional state. How do we feel about our voice? Because in order to be proud of the singing that we do, we need to be comfortable with the sounds that we're producing. So for example, when people tell me I don't like the sound of my voice, it sounds terrible. Like I don't sound like X artist. I don't sound like my friend that's really good at singing. So I feel like I'm terrible. There's a lot of comparison going on. And often that comparison is not fair. Often my students will compare themselves against artists that are singing on a studio track that's been heavily produced. There's auto-tune on it. There's EQ. There's reverb. There's all these different effects that are playing a role in making the final sound that they're hearing. And then they are comparing that with their voice on a recording on their iPhone. There's a massive difference between those two. And one thing that I recently did with one of my students to show him the difference was we walked through the step-by-step process of recording his vocals and what he thought was sounding so terrible, and then put it through all the processing that these other vocalists put their voices through. And he noticed how much better it sounds once it's gone through all of that processing. It's just not fair for anybody to hold themselves up to the level of studio recordings. Much better to go after a live recording that we know is genuinely live, because we know that a lot of live recordings are not always 100% truthful and not always going to be fully live. They're lip synced a lot of times. So the first step in building a voice that we're proud of is knowing what to compare ourselves to and how to be comparing our voice, or whether we should even be comparing our voice altogether. Should we just try to build on what we have? Sometimes the best point of comparison and the best competitor for yourself is your older self. So comparing your first recording to a later recording is much more of an effective means of showing where is my progress going than comparing yourself to somebody else who is recorded in a professional studio with really good engineers that know how to apply effects to a track. If you want to sing with more confidence and power, then you have to sign up for my lesson subscription. You get 2 group lessons with me personally every single week. You get access to all my courses, and you get access to recordings of all my one-on-one lessons with my students. That will help you learn vicariously through them. Click the link down below to sign up now. The next step in building a voice that you can be proud of is really not thinking about building, rather stripping away some of the stuff that might not actually be serving you well. Learning to sing is much less about learning something brand new than it is really just about learning how to undo the bad habits that we've built up through our lives. This concept of having to make something new or create something from scratch can be very misleading. We don't want to think about starting something brand new. We want to think about building on what we already have. Many people actually have very good speech habits, but then when it comes to singing, they do something totally different. I want you to start thinking about singing as an extension of speech. Really, when we're singing, we're just holding out certain notes in our voice and certain vowels, sounds. As I'm speaking, if I spoke with elongated vowels, that's basically an extension of singing. It's not very melodic because I'm just kind of following where my voice would naturally go. But if you start to pay attention, your natural speaking pattern has melody to it, has melody to it, has melody to it, has melody to it, has melody to it. If you notice, as I repeat the same thing over and over and over again, the melody starts to become more apparent of what I'm actually saying. A lot of times, because there's no repetition with our speech and with the way that our speech flows, we don't hear the melody involved. But if we repeat it over and over again, we start to hear that melody much more clearly. All this is to say that speaking is not as far removed as many people think from singing. I want you to borrow some of the patterns that you have with speech over to you're singing. Now, first, it's important to find out, are your speech patterns proper? Because we don't want to build off of improper speech patterns. Ask yourself this: does it feel easy to speak? Do I feel like there's strain, there's push, there's discomfort in my speech pattern? If the answer is no to all those questions, then you definitely want to borrow from your speech patterns. The final aspect that I want to point out about building a voice that you can be proud of is to practice on a regular basis. Now, I can't stress this enough of how important it is to be consistent with it. Now, we want to be consistent without overdoing it. So think of your voice as a limited resource. It's not something that can just be used on end without ever being fatigued or worn out. Your voice will have a point where it won't be able to go anymore. So we don't want to push past that point. We don't even want to approach that point. But you've got to try to input practice as a natural part of your daily routine. If you struggle with being consistent with your singing practice, try this. I want you to try something called habit stacking. This is a method that comes from the book Atomic Habits. I highly recommend reading that book. But in that book, it describes one of the ways that we can build new habits is by piggybacking on habits that we already have. So let's say every single day you brush your teeth, right? If you, right after you're done brushing your teeth, do your vocal warm-ups, you are much more likely to do it every single day after your teeth brushing. Let's say you take a shower every morning. Try to do your vocal warm-ups in the shower or right after the shower. This is especially good because the steam from the shower itself will help to warm up and hydrate your vocal cords. Those are my biggest tips for building a confident voice that you can be proud of. If you're interested in learning more about this and other topics with regards to singing, check out that video right there. You're gonna like it.